Fix my car, not my heart. The mechanic who stole a CEO's weekend. And everything else. The garage smelled like motor oil, worn leather, and coffee that had gone cold somewhere around noon and never got reheated. Jake Harlow didn't mind. He'd stopped noticing the smell years ago, the same way you stop noticing the sound of your own heartbeat. The garage was his world, 3 bays, 2 hydraulic lifts, a parts wall that he'd organized himself and reorganized twice, and a front desk run by Donna Marsh, who was 63 years old, had seen everything twice, and ran the entire operation with the quiet authority of someone who knew exactly how indispensable she was. Jake had bought Harlow Auto Shop 2 years ago from his old boss Raymond, who had worked it for 22 years before. His knees and his doctor both told him it was time to stop. Jake had scraped together every dollar he had, taken out a loan that made his chest tight whenever he thought about it too hard, and signed his name on the paperwork with a hand that was steadier than he felt. It was the biggest thing he'd ever done, bigger than enlisting, bigger than getting married, bigger in a different way than getting divorced. That had been the year before the divorce. His wife Sarah had smiled at him across a dinner table in February and said everything was fine. In March, she handed him papers and a cardboard box with some of his things already in it, like she'd been planning the exit, while she was still pretending. There was nothing to exit from. He never fully understood what had gone wrong, which was maybe the worst part. A broken engine tells you where it failed. People are less honest. Since then, the garage had been everything. His work, his focus, his reason to get up at 5:30 in the morning. He had Cody, his 19-year-old assistant, who was enthusiastic and mostly useful and occasionally steam-cleaned the wrong. He had Donna. He had the satisfaction of taking something broken and making it run again. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was real, and it was his. He was elbow-deep in a Ford pickup's undercarriage on a Tuesday afternoon in October when he heard the heels. Click, click, click. Sharp and deliberate on the concrete apron outside the garage doors. Maplewood, Ohio was not a town where people wore heels on Tuesday afternoons. Population 12,000, home of the annual Harvest Festival and the best apple butter in the state. And on an ordinary weekday, the loudest thing on Main Street was usually the high school football practice 2 blocks over. Jake slid out from under the truck and looked up. She was walking through the open bay door like she owned the building and was considering whether to keep it. Blonde hair that caught the late October sunlight and turned it gold. A white silk blouse that probably cost more than Jake's monthly insurance payment. A deep crimson leather skirt, and heels that had no business being within 50 miles of a garage. Floor. She moved with the particular confidence of someone who had never once walked into a room and wondered if she belonged there. She stopped in front of the black Mercedes in Bay 3, looked at it the way a surgeon looks at a chart, reading it, calculating. "Is this fixable?" she asked. No greeting, no preamble. Jake stood up, wiped his hands on his shop rag. "Everything's fixable. The real question is whether it's worth it." She turned and looked at him directly. Her eyes were light gray and extremely alert. That's a philosophical answer for a mechanic. And that's a condescending observation for someone whose rear axle is destroyed, he said. Something moved across her face. Not anger, more like the expression of someone who has run a quick internal calculation and come out surprised by the result. "Fair," she said. "I'm Natalie." "Jake," he nodded toward the Mercedes. "Rear axle is your main problem, but you've also got brake line issues and your transmission fluid looks like someone poured chocolate milk in there. This car has been ignored for a long time. I've been busy. Busy enough that you've been driving around with brake lines that could have given out at highway speed." She held his gaze without flinching. Apparently so. He printed her a quote and handed it across. She looked at it for about 3 seconds. No wince, no sharp intake of breath, no asking if he could do better. She just nodded like the number was a data point she was filing away, and reached for her phone. 2 calls later, the picture became clear. Her assistant was in Chicago. Her usual driver had come with the car and was now stranded with her. There were no ride shares available in a 40-minute radius. She hung up and stood in his garage with the particular still expression of someone accustomed to having problems solve themselves, confronting one that hadn't. "Is there a decent hotel in this town?" she asked. "Riverside Inn, mile down Main Street. Clean, good breakfast, the owner is a good person." He leaned against the workbench. "You also picked an interesting weekend for this to happen. Town does the Harvest Festival starting Friday evening. Whole Main Street closes down, live music, food, craft vendors. It's a pretty big deal around here." She blinked slowly. "A Harvest Festival?" "Yeah. I haven't been to anything like that since I was maybe 8 years old." "Then you're overdue." He kept his voice easy. "You're going to be here 2 days minimum while I fix this car. Might as well see what the town looks like when it's actually alive." She tilted her head slightly. "Is that an invitation?" "It's a practical observation. The garage will still be here if you'd rather stand in it." For the first time, something that was almost a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. "What time Friday?" Jake spent Wednesday and Thursday telling himself firmly that it was not a date. He was just being a decent human being towards someone stranded in a town they didn't know. That was community. That was basic decency. That was all. Donna watched him reorganize the socket wrench display on Thursday morning, then reorganize it again 20 minutes later, and said absolutely nothing. She just drank her coffee with the tranquil expression of someone who has waited out many things and intends to wait out many more. "Don't," Jake said without looking at her. "I haven't said a word," Donna said serenely. "You're thinking entire paragraphs." "I'm thinking about the Henderson break job and whether we ordered enough pads." She picked up the phone. She called this morning to check on the repair timeline, by the way. Asked very specific questions about the axle replacement process. She knows what she's talking about. Lots of people know about cars. Lots of people pretend to know about cars. She actually does. Donna dialed. "I told her you'd have it done by Sunday morning." She said that was fine. A pause. She asked what your favorite spot in town was. I told her about the lake. Jake looked at her. "Harlow Auto, this is Donna," she said cheerfully into the phone and turned her chair away. Friday evening, Natalie arrived at 6 o'clock exactly. She'd changed into dark jeans and a soft camel-colored jacket, and she'd left her hair down. She looked entirely different. The corporate precision was still there, in the way she held herself, but the hard surface was gone. She looked like a person who had decided, at least for one evening, to put down whatever it was she usually carried. They walked out into the festival together and Jake watched her take in Main Street. The string lights strung between lampposts, the vendor stalls, the smell of kettle corn and wood smoke, the bluegrass band setting up near the town square, children running between adults' legs, old couples moving slowly through it all like they had nowhere to be, and no intention of hurrying. She didn't pull out her phone. She didn't comment. She just looked. He bought her a caramel apple from the Miller farm stand. She ate the whole thing unhurried, not worrying about what it was doing to her appearance. They stopped at a woodworking stall where a craftsman named Gerald had built an entire display of hand-joined furniture, and Natalie asked him 3 questions about his joinery technique that were better informed than Gerald's usual customers managed, and ended up buying a small hand-carved bowl that she carried under her arm for the rest of the evening, like it was something she'd owned for years. "You're different than I expected," she said, when they'd settled on a bench near the music stage with cups of hot apple cider. "How so?" "I expected someone quieter, more closed off." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "Men who do physical work all day and don't talk about it much. In my experience, they tend to keep everything else locked up too. Maybe around people who make them feel like they should be," Jake said. She looked at him sideways. "Is that about me?" "It's a general observation." It felt specific. Most true things do. She was quiet for a moment. The banjo rang out bright and clean from the stage, and a few couples moved onto the open area in front of it. "People are usually either intimidated by me or performing for me," she said. Not complaining, just stating it as a fact she'd long since made peace with. "You've done neither." "Should I be doing one of them?" "God, no." She almost laughed. "It's the most refreshing thing that's happened to me in months." They stayed until the music ended at 10. She laughed twice, real laughs, unguarded, the kind that arrived before she could decide whether to let them. Once at a story about Cody and the wrong car, and once at herself, when she caught her heel in a cobblestone gap and grabbed his arm and then stood there half a second longer than the situation required. He walked her to the Riverside Inn and they stood on the front porch in the quiet. "Tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow," she said. Saturday morning he drove them out to Crescent Lake. In his truck with the windows cracked and a thermos of coffee and the radio low. The trees along the county road had gone. Full October, burning orange and deep, red and gold that seemed lit from inside. She sat with her arm resting on the door and watched the landscape move past and didn't feel the need to fill every silence. At the lake they sat on the tailgate and talked for 3 hours. He told her about 4 years in the Army as a vehicle mechanic, 2 deployments, the particular strangeness of coming home to a country that had continued without him. About the divorce, not the details, just the shape of it. The way it had quietly taken apart something he'd thought was solid. About rebuilding, about how the garage had given him back something he hadn't known he was missing, which was the simple, reliable satisfaction of a problem with a real solution. She told him about starting her company at 26 with 2 clients, a borrowed office space, and a business plan she'd rewritten 11 times. About the years that followed, the 100-hour weeks, the deals that fell through, the ones that didn't, the board meetings, where she was the youngest person and the only woman and had to be twice as precise as anyone else in the room, just to be taken equally seriously. About the slow accumulation of success that had given her everything she'd aimed for and left her, somehow, with the persistent feeling that something was still missing. "Are you happy?" he asked, direct, no softening. She thought about it genuinely. "I'm proud," she said finally. "I'm proud of what I built. And I'm very, very tired. And I'm not sure those 2 things are supposed to coexist the way they do in my life." "They can," Jake said. "But you have to build in the rest. It doesn't come by itself." "Is that what this weekend is, rest?" He looked at the lake. A heron stood motionless at the far edge, waiting. "I don't know what this weekend is," he said honestly. "But whatever it is, it seems like you needed it." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Yes, I really did." The thermos went cold. Neither of them noticed until the drive home. Sunday morning, 8 a.m. car was ready. She came at 9, back in the silk blouse and leather skirt, armor reassembled, ready to return to her world. He walked her through everything: new axle, replaced brake lines, full transmission service, a cracked serpentine belt he'd caught on deep inspection. She listened to all of it carefully and asked 3 questions and understood the answers without needing them. Translated. He held out the keys. She didn't take them right away. "I should tell you who I am," she said. "You told me, Natalie." "Natalie Reed," she said. "Founder and CEO of Reed Capital Group. We manage around $4 billion across 12 states. I have a driver, a personal assistant, a private chef, and an apartment in Manhattan that costs more per month than most people make in a year." She watched his face. "I came to this part of Ohio for a meeting in Columbus and drove myself because I wanted an hour alone. I didn't tell you any of that because I genuinely needed, a weekend where someone talked to me like a regular person. I'm sorry I wasn't honest about it." Jake absorbed this. He thought about the caramel apple, the lake, the way she'd listened, really listened, like what he said was worth her full attention. The question she'd asked Gerald about joinery, the half-second she'd held his arm on the cobblestones. None of it felt different now. "I figured something was off when you didn't react to the quote," he said. She almost smiled. "That obvious? You held the paper differently." He shrugged. "Didn't change anything." She looked at him with an expression that was quiet and certain and something else he didn't have a word for yet. Then she said, "Reed Capital invests in small businesses. Strong fundamentals, clear leadership, real growth potential. We've scaled 3 auto service companies in the last 4 years." She looked around the garage, at the organized bays, the clean equipment, the hand-updated whiteboard. "This operation qualifies. You qualify. I'd like to have a real conversation about what a partnership could look like. You want to invest in my garage?" "I want to invest in you," she said. "The garage is where we start." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the garage, his garage, built from another man's bones and his own stubborn refusal to settle for someone else's version of his life. Call Donna, he said. She runs my schedule. Natalie smiled, full, unhurried, real. She already gave me her direct number. Of course she did. She got in the car. The Mercedes started smooth and quiet, the way it was always supposed to. She pulled out of Bay 3 and onto the street, and at the end of the driveway she stopped, window down. Jake. He looked up. Thank you. For all of it. For talking to me like a person, a beat. I didn't know how much I needed that until it was happening. Drive careful, he said. Rain's coming in from the west. Brake lines are new, but take it easy anyway. One last smile. Then she was gone. Down Main Street past the quiet post-festival calm. Past the Riverside Inn. Past the bench where they'd sat with apple cider while the banjo played. And out onto the highway. Back toward the $4 billion world that was waiting for her. Jake stood in the garage doorway. Until the car disappeared over the long flat hill at the edge of town. Then he picked up his shop rag and went back to work. But something had shifted. Something quiet and stubborn and real. Like a gear that had finally found its proper alignment. The future felt less like something he was enduring and more like something he was actually moving toward. Donna appeared beside him with a fresh coffee. Said nothing, just handed it over. He took it. Thursday, she said after a moment. For the meeting. I already blocked the afternoon. He nodded slowly, drank his coffee, watched the October light fall golden across the garage floor. Thursday's good, he said. Some weekends arrive disguised as inconveniences. A broken axle, a missed rideshare, a small town you never meant to stop in. But sometimes the breakdown is the whole point. Sometimes the detour is the road.